My name is Tom Lockcatch. I served 25 years in Cyber Command, rose to the rank of Lieutenant Colonel, and spent most of my adult life navigating digital battlefields that no one ever saw. I've decoded terrorist networks, shut down foreign intelligence breaches, and testified in classified hearings before senators who couldn't pronounce half the acronyms I lived with daily. But none of that prepared me for what it felt like to stand on the sidewalk outside the house my grandfather built and be treated like a trespasser. It was late September. I had just stepped out of a cab, my discharge papers still warm in my bag. The weight of silence pressing against my chest, the porch light flickered above me, the kind of faint glow that used to mean welcome. Now it felt like surveillance. My sister Delilah answered the intercom. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask if I was okay. She just looked down from the top of the stairs and said flatly, "I'm calling the police." At first, I thought it was some kind of joke. Then I saw the way her hand hovered over her phone, already dialing. "You can't just show up here," she snapped. "This isn't your home anymore, Tamsin. You left. You disappeared." "I just came back from service," I said, my voice caught on the last word, brittle as dry leaves. "I thought maybe I could see Mom." "She doesn't want to see you," Delilah replied, her expression hard as stone. "Neither does Dad." Then she said something that hit me harder than any battlefield blast. "You're not in the will. You're not even on the deed." 10 minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up. One officer was young, the other older military buzzcut. A slight hesitation in his step as he looked at me in uniform. Recognition flickered in his eyes. "Lieutenant Colonel Lockcatch?" he asked. I nodded, but it didn't matter. "This property belongs to Delilah Thatcher and Richard Lockcatch," the younger officer said. "There's no record of you having legal access." I stepped back as the gate closed again. And in that moment, I realized something far colder than war had just begun. I wasn't fighting enemies this time. I was fighting blood, and I would not lose. I didn't drive away that night. I parked 2 blocks down and sat in the dark with my coat zipped to my chin, the street lights pulling faint halos onto the pavement. The house, my grandfather's house, still loomed at the end of the lane. Its windows glowing soft amber like nothing had changed. But everything had. The front lawn, once dotted with grandma's hydrangeas, now held a single sign stuck crooked in the ground. "For sale, private listing." I stared at it until the words blurred. I hadn't cried in years. Not when I deployed. Not when we lost soldiers in Bahrain. Not even when I came home to an empty apartment and a military pension that felt more like a tombstone than a thank you. But that night, something cracked. The place that was supposed to anchor me where I'd climbed trees, memorized Morse code with Grandpa, and slept under a ceiling of glow-in-the-dark stars was now being scrubbed of my existence. And no one inside seemed to care. I stayed in the car until morning. My uniform, still neatly pressed from the discharge ceremony, had creases that dug into my skin like insults. I watched lights flicker on inside the house around dawn. A figure moved in the living room. I knew the posture before I saw the face. Me father, still thin, still upright like he ran boardrooms in his sleep. He never once looked toward the street. I pulled out my phone. I wasn't sure what I expected. A message from Mom, maybe a breadcrumb of acknowledgement, but there was only one unread text. No name, just return to base. There's nothing here for you. I let the phone fall into the cup holder and stared at the dashboard until the sun edged above the rooftops. I wasn't going back to base. I wasn't built for surrender. At 9:00 a.m., I walked into a small cafe just off Jefferson Street. Ruth Clay was already there, sitting in the back corner in a black blazer that made her look like she hadn't aged a day since undergrad. We'd shared a dorm once, a short-lived friendship interrupted by duty and time zones. But when she looked up and saw me, something in her expression cracked open recognition, maybe regret. She didn't ask how I'd been, just turned her tablet toward me. "Thought you might want to see this," she said. On the screen was a real estate listing 1450 Windmere Lane, my grandfather's address, listed under Ravencrest Holdings LLC. I didn't sign anything, I said. She nodded. That's what I figured. She tapped again, revealing a property transfer filed 3 months ago. My name Tamsin Locke appeared on the seller line. That's not my signature. No, she said quietly. It's not. But we're going to prove that. And just like that, my battle had a shape. A war not on foreign soil, but buried deep in family lies, forged ink, and one stolen home. And I was ready to fight. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the hum of the cafe soft against the clatter of coffee cups. Ruth had already pulled up half a dozen documents, property transfers, notary stamps, filing records. She moved like a lawyer who'd done this before. I, on the other hand, felt like I was learning a new language, one that used betrayal as punctuation. This notary, she said, tapping the corner of the screen, was suspended last year for falsifying DMV affidavit. Same signature shows up on your deed transfer. My jaw clenched. So, they didn't just steal the house. They planned this. They did more than plan it, Ruth said, flipping to another file. They moved fast and they made it look clean. I shook my head. Delilah said I wasn't on the deed, that I'd been cut out of the will. Ruth looked at me carefully. Your grandfather left the house to you, didn't he? I nodded. He told me in person, said it out loud the day before he died, but I never got to see the paperwork. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a printed county registry record. They filed a new will a month later. That one leaves everything to your father and Delilah. My stomach turned. They forged the will. Could be or coerced it. Either way, it's not consistent with the version I remember from years ago. We'll need to find an original. I kept copies, I muttered. Digital backups, maybe even his old video journal. Ruth's eyes lit up. If we find even one inconsistency, timestamps, handwriting, witness credential sits enough to open a civil claim. I leaned back in my chair. They told me to my face that I didn't matter, that the house wasn't mine. And now I find out they buried a trail of fake documents under a shell company. Ravencrest is the buffer. Ruth said. Brian Calloway's name shows up on Associated Logistics filings. My hand stiffened. Delilah's husband. Yep. Works in supply chain, right? International freight. Always traveling. Never clear about where. Ruth opened her legal pad and began jotting notes. I'll file an injunction to freeze the title. We'll subpoena the notary, pull all land records for Windmere Lane, and start tracing Ravencrest's ownership tree. It was methodical. Ruth moved with the precision of someone who didn't flinch at power plays. And yet, I couldn't help feeling like a child again, locked out of her own house, watching the adults steal Christmas. They think I won't fight back, I said. They don't know you, Ruth replied. That night, I drove past the house again. The porch light was off. The hydrangeas were gone. The place looked polished and wrong-like. Someone had tried to erase the memory of a life and missed only the ghost in the sidewalk cracks. They took my home on paper, but I had a pen, too, and I was going to write myself back in. The next morning, Ruth called me early. Her voice was calm, but there was tension beneath it. I pulled the utility records for the house, she said. Power spikes like industrial refrigeration, sustained load for what? I asked. That's the thing, she said. There are no permits filed, no business license, no renovations on record, but someone's definitely running equipment that shouldn't be in a residential basement. The silence between us sharpened. I knew that kind of vague, shadow powerful, quiet, and always hiding in plain sight. I need to see it myself, I said. I figured you'd say that. Be careful, Tamsin. That evening, I parked 2 blocks from the house again. Windows cracked just enough to feel the fall air bite my skin. I had no plan, just instinct. Around 10:45, a man appeared across the street. Mid-40s, baseball cap pulled low, jacket zipped tight. He didn't look at me, just leaned casually against a lamp post. When he walked away, I noticed something wedged under my windshield wiper. A plain piece of paper, no envelope, one line, all caps. If you're really Tamsin, meet me at alley 9, 11 p.m. Come alone. I hesitated for less than a second. The alley behind Windmere Lane was barely lit. Chain link fences, old recycling bins, and the faint smell of oil and dust. He was already waiting. Weathered face, mechanic's hands. A Marine Corps tattoo faded on his forearm. I knew your grandfather, he said before I could speak. Name's Ethan. I fix cars at McRae down the road. I've lived here long enough to know when something ain't right. I stared at him, not trusting easily. What did you see? They say you're unstable. That you've got issues from combat. That's what your sister tells the neighbors. I didn't flinch. Let them talk. But I've seen men come at night. He said, vans, no plates, always black. They back into the alley, unload crates, real quiet, always the same guy watching. Real tall. Wears gloves. Never speaks. He paused. Your sister's husband, Brian. He's there every time. The tightness in my chest grew heavier. Did you see what they brought in? Couldn't get close, but it ain't furniture. Boxes get locked inside that basement door. And then power use jumps through the roof. I slipped a small audio recorder from my coat pocket and held it tight. I need to see it myself. That's not smart, he warned. These aren't folks who care about laws. I don't care if they care, I said. That night, I dressed in black, clipped a camera to my collar, and returned to the alley alone. I stayed low, using the half-burned fence for cover. At 12:03 a.m., I heard the first low engine growl. 2 black trucks rolled in, lights off. 4 men climbed out. One of them was Brian. He moved with confidence, gesturing toward the back entrance like he owned it. I recorded everything, their movements, their faces, the timestamps. Then Brian stepped into the warehouse and I followed. I couldn't get close enough to see inside, but I found a vent with a clear audio path. I slipped the recorder inside and waited. Voices filtered through the metal. The officer finds out. No warning. Sever the tie. I stopped breathing. That voice, I knew it. Southern cadence, gravel-lined, slow and deliberate. My father, he wasn't just complicit. He was leading it. I backed away, hand shaking around the recorder. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I did what I'd been trained to do. I documented. I cataloged. I disappeared into the shadows because now I had proof. And the war had a voice his. By morning, the recorder was gone. I had returned to the alley just after sunrise, hoping to retrieve it before anyone noticed, but the vent was cleano device. No trace I had ever been there. That told me 2 things. They knew I was watching and they were watching back. An hour later, I got the message. No name, no greeting. You're playing with fire. I have your military psych file. Want to see what it says about you? I stared at the screen, breath frozen, heart hammering. Whoever sent it had access to restricted archives, and they wanted me rattled, but they underestimated what kind of soldier I was. I didn't delete the message. I forwarded Ito Ruth and to Isaac Ing, a cybersecurity analyst I'd served with during a joint task force in Ramstein. We hadn't spoken in 2 years, but he replied in 6 minutes. Pull everything. Start building the chain. Don't wait. That night, my apartment turned into a war room. I powered up 2 laptops, a backup server, and 3 encrypted drives. The documents I'd stored over the years, copies of emails, scans of property files, encrypted call logs were no longer sentimental scraps. They were ammunition. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. A contact pinged in. Kayla, a digital forensics expert Ruth had on standby, joined our private Zoom call. No face, voice modulated. She specialized in scrubbing the lies others left behind. "I got your data packet," she said. "Nice encryption. Let's see what the liars missed." She dove into IP logs, metadata chains, financial timestamps. Isaac traced shell company transactions. Within hours, they had a map Raven Crest, Brian's logistics firm, Delilah's personal account, and a series of midnight wire transfers that stank of laundering. Then Isaac froze. "Wait, this signature on the leasing contract? It's your father's." He authorized warehouse storage under Raven Crest. I leaned back. The air sucked from the room. He hadn't just known. He signed off on all of it. "I'm filing an injunction," Ruth said. "Forgery, fraud, and conspiracy to commit federal contract abuse. We go to court now." I stared at the screen where my father's name sat under the words, "Land Use Supervisor." They stole my house. Now I would take back the ground they stood on, one paper at a time. 2 days later, we walked straight through the front gates. No more circling the block. No more hiding in shadows. Ruth and I pulled into the driveway of the house my grandfather left me. The house they'd stolen with forged signatures and offshore money. The Lexus was there. So was Brian's black F-Zero. A perfect morning for truth. I wore my uniform. Not because I needed to, because they needed to see it. Ruth straightened her jacket and handed me the envelope. "You ready?" I'd been ready since the day they called me a stranger. I rang the doorbell. Delilah answered, face freshly painted, a performance smile already in place until she saw me. Her lips twitched. Then she saw Ruth and the envelope. The color drained from her face. "We're here to serve you with a court injunction," Ruth said calmly, placing the documents into Delilah's hand. "Effective immediately. All property transfers, leases, and financial movements tied to this address are frozen. The county land office is aware." Delilah stared at the envelope like it might bite her. "You can't do this." Brian stepped into the hallway. His tone was slow, oily. "You really want to go down this road, Tamsin?" I met his eyes. "I was trained to walk roads like this. I know how to navigate darkness." He smirked. "You don't know who you're fighting." "I do," I said. "A logistics fraudster, a forged deed accomplice, and a coward who used my name to win federal contracts." His jaw tightened. "You're unstable. I've been evaluated. You'll see the results entered into evidence." Ruth stepped in. "And if you speak another word of intimidation, we'll file for witness harassment." Delilah clutched the envelope like a drowning woman clinging to plastic. "This is our house." "No, I said it was mine before you rewrote history." We turned and walked back to the car. The door slammed behind us hard and hollow. In the passenger seat, Ruth exhaled. "They'll hit back." I looked straight ahead. They already did. Now it's our turn. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclamation of land, of truth, of a name they tried to erase. The courtroom was quiet. No drama, no shouting, just the steady pulse of federal process. I sat behind the witness table in uniform, back straight, ribbons sharp, eyes calm. When the prosecutor asked me to explain what happened, I didn't waver. "They forged my signature on a deed transferring my grandfather's house," I said. "They created false financial trails, funneled government funds through shell accounts, and used my military clearance codes to access contracts they were never qualified to touch." Delilah stared at her hands. Brian kept whispering to his attorney. My father, Richard, stared past me like if he didn't look directly at me, none of this would stick. But it did. The judge reviewed each piece of evidence. The signature inconsistencies, the IP logs, the wire transfers, the notary suspension, the recorded aimed father's voice, gravel-lined and unmistakable. If the officer finds out, sever the tie. Then came the question that mattered. In your opinion, Colonel Lockcatch, the prosecutor asked, was this a deliberate conspiracy? Yes, I said. They didn't just try to erase my name. They used it and they built an empire on silence. The court ruled Delilah 6 years. Brianite Richard Lockett years. No parole, no reaction, no shouting, just a pause. And then the sound of futures collapsing underweight. They thought no one would ever lift. Outside, reporters waited. I didn't speak to them, but I saw them, the veterans. Some in faded jackets, some leaning on canes, some nodding quietly as I passed. One reached out, his hand steady. "Colonel Locke," he said. "You reminded them we still stand." I nodded. We don't stay erased. Weeks later, I visited the Defense Service Library. It smelled of polished stone and quiet memory. On the wall of honor carved into black granite was my name. Colonel Tamsin Locke, Cyber Command 1998 2023. No one could take that from me. Not my father, not Delilah, not anyone who tried to make me forget what I stood for. I stood for truth, not vengeance. I walked out of the courtroom not with their house, not with their money, but with my name, my honor, and the kind of justice that doesn't come with noise. It comes with clarity. And in that silence I stood unshaken.